Hi, this video is about ChatGPT versus the Gemini app. Not to be confused with the Gemini models. I should name this a bit better. You think OpenAI has naming problems, at least ChatGPT is separately named from the models. So the fact that they've named everything Gemini, it does make it confusing. The Gemini models are a part of the experience of the Gemini app, but we're comparing the apps primarily. So the models will play a part in the abilities of the apps, but we're actually comparing the overall experience of the apps. And in this video, we'll cover how these apps work, the models that they use, the pricing differences, the value you get for each one, the kinds of responses that you can get, the features you get with each, their search-enabled usefulness, the mobile experience, and then some examples for comparisons. Real quickly, how these apps work. ChatGPT actually uses fine-tuned versions of their models that are made specifically for the ChatGPT experience. So this 4.0 model that we have right here is not the same exact model. It's very close, but it's not the same exact model that I would get if I use the API. So a lot of the other applications that use the API, so like Perplexity, or there's a lot of other tools out there that are kind of like ChatGPT clones with the same models. It's same models. It's not the exact same model set, and this will come into play later on as we'll see some of the benefits of the way that OpenAI has actually done this. But basically, at its core, ChatGPT is primarily an interface to have conversations with its models. And that's basically how Gemini works. Now, there is a pretty substantial difference that it's subtle, but in certain situations, I notice a pretty big difference, which is the fine-tune of the models specifically for the ChatGPT app. I don't really see that in Gemini. I think that this model that I get here, the models that are listed in here, are basically the same models that I get if I use the API. So they're not really tuned for chat, which is different than what you use with the API. There's some nuance to how you interact with them, and again, we'll see that later on in the video how that comes into play. So let's compare the pricing. I do pay the $20 per month for ChatGPT, and there is an option for a $200 per month for the Pro version of ChatGPT. So I currently pay for the Plus, and I shot a separate video. I'll put a link to it in the description where I talked about the value of upgrading. Is it worth it? And so go ahead and go check out that video if you want to know about that. But I do use ChatGPT quite a bit, and I think the Plus is pretty useful. I think it's a pretty big upgrade over the free. You get a lot more usage of the 4.0 model, which is pretty good and useful for a lot of different scenarios. I use a lot of the just kind of creative brainstorming and question and answers, and then I generate YouTube thumbnails and a few other odds and ends with the Plus plan. It does give you a little bit of Sora, so you get some video generation if that's what you're interested in. You get some of the most advanced features overall at the Plus, so I think it's a pretty good deal. Now, I've been using Gemini a lot more lately, and really the biggest limitation is that I only get so many of the 2.5 Pro, which is by far and away their best model. The Flash model is thinking. I don't really know exactly how much better it is. I think the benchmarks are pretty good on both of these models, but I'm going to go ahead and upgrade to the Gemini Advanced, and there's a variety of reasons for this. I've been waiting for this video to upgrade on this model. I do use a lot of the Google storage, and so I'm interested in getting the Google storage. I do use Google for a lot of my other work processes. So the fact that you get these other benefits, it could be significant for some people because I know Google is very popular. The 2 terabytes of storage. This is mostly for my Google Photos, and every once in a while, like I've had to upgrade on their Google One price. I think I'm paying $4 or $5 a month, so that kind of makes this cheaper, and you get a 1 month free. I've heard good things about the Notebook LM Plus, but I don't plan on using it. And I guess it's supposed to enhance my Gmail, although I don't really like the idea. I know that there's a lot of people saying, oh, it can write your emails for you. That's not really my interest. And the VO2 model, I think, is similar to Sora, and then it's good, but it's kind of a little bit of a toy, and I don't think it's really the best model on the market. I think the biggest thing you get here is, well, it's not showing it here, I guess expanded features. being able to use the 2.5 Pro as much as I want, that's a really key thing there. I just want to be able to use the best model over and over again. It's a very fast model as well, although it is a thinking model. And I also am interested in really maxing out their deep research. I'm not impressed with ChatGPT's deep research. I know a lot of people like it, but in my experience, and if you see my comparison video, I'll put a link to it in the description of ChatGPT versus Perplexity. ChatGPT's ability to search and use that search data is actually pretty crappy sometimes. It's like hit or miss, and I really trust Google a lot more for that. And so I plan on going back and really doing the max deep research on Gemini, and so I'm really excited to actually test that out. And then it does have a longer context window, so getting access to that maximum context window. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade this right now. So now we can see that this has changed a little bit. We got the deep research, which I'm excited to run a similar test to what I had done before in ChatGPT. I'm going to run that right now. Okay, so one big difference is the formatting of the responses. And this is very similar. What you see on the right with Gemini is similar to what you see in a lot of other different kind of ChatGPT clones. And I think this is where ChatGPT, having all that data that they have right now, and they're fine-tuned for ChatGPT specifically, I think that the formatting of the responses in ChatGPT are consistently more readable. Like, you look at this over here on the right versus this. This has less information, so sometimes you'll get less details here, and even details that are wrong. So this is a really great comparison of also their search. So we're getting both aspects here. So this is talking about comparing Gemini 1.5, which that's a pretty old model. So it's even its own data that its own data with regards to ChatGPT, it gets wrong, which is kind of hilarious, but expect at the same time. So from a search standpoint, this is a terrible answer. But if you take out like the factuality of it, this is so much more readable, so much faster to consume, and I like this answer. The structure of this answer a lot better. The actual information in Gemini is better. It's not perfect. It actually talks about 2.0 Pro and not 2.5, which is again kind of interesting that both of these kind of got their latest models wrong. But in general, across a lot of scenarios, the Gemini is going to do a much better job of search, which is kind of what you expect. In fact, I don't really see a reason to pay for Perplexity when you can do Gemini. I think Gemini overall is just going to be a lot better. You have direct access to the models, and its ability to search the internet is superior to Perplexity, in my opinion. Let me know if the comments. I'm thinking about shooting a video of Gemini versus Perplexity. Let me know if you want that. However, if let's say this was something that was well known, where it's old school stuff that doesn't need up-to-date search, I'm going to be much happier, and that's with getting the information I need as fast and as conveniently as possible with the structure of ChatGPT. Look at this is so readable. I really like the bullet points. I like these little icons, the charts. This is clearly tuned a lot for the ability for somebody to consume it. Well, these answers are just too long here. This takes a lot longer to consume, and really, I think part of the challenge here is that, and this is maybe a reason why when you use for the benchmarks, they use the APIs for OpenAI, because a lot of the benchmarks are tuned to where the longer the answer, the better it gets rated, because this answer is just kind of too long, and it just needs to be more concise. So a pretty big win for ChatGPT, and another big win for Gemini. Let's talk about the unique features that you with ChatGPT that you basically don't get with the Gemini. There's more overall that you can do with it, while Gemini feels like essentially like newer software. But it still can do a lot of good things. So the custom GPTs, you don't get anything like that with Gemini. They do have something called gems, which is I think supposed to be similar, but not quite. So if we go in and we look at gems, create a gem with advanced. Since I have an advanced, I can create a gem. I think this is supposed to be sort of like their custom GPTs, but I'm not real confident that this is even as good as the custom GPTs, and I don't even really like the custom GPTs that much. Like when I clicked on create a new one, it's defaulting to deep research, and I don't really know what I'm supposed to do here. I guess I could ask it questions, but so I'd say that's an advantage to ChatGPT, that you can actually create the custom GPTs if that's something you're interested in. Another thing that is, it's weird. It's kind of strange to me that it took a long time, for almost 2 years, I think, for ChatGPT to actually implement this feature. But the ability to search through previous conversations is actually really useful. The more you use something, if you use something very little, then it's not as important. But if this tool becomes something that you use a lot, this is actually pretty useful, and sometimes this is a big time saver. There is nothing like that in Gemini. All it has is just a list of all of my chats, and it does a show more, and there's no way to jump to the right conversation. So another pro for ChatGPT. I really like the code interpreter, and it doesn't come into play very often, but sometimes with either advanced logical situations or where you kind of just need a temporary script to really answer a question, the code interpreter is incredibly useful. And essentially what it does is it writes a temporary Python script that runs through to give you an answer, so that this script can actually generate the responses and kind of process data on the fly, and create a script to process data on the fly. And that is really useful, and I haven't seen anything like that in Gemini. It doesn't come into play a lot, but it's really useful. I also really like ChatGPT's memory. I think it's pretty basic, and it doesn't always work, but every once in a while it's really nice, and it just, if I forget a piece of information about myself, it kind of already remembers it. Sometimes it gets in the way, and sometimes you don't want it to do that, but in general, like, it remembers my age, my location, that I have a dog, and sometimes that comes into play where there's other scenarios, like where I create an avatar for YouTube, and I can just reference that avatar over and over again without having to restate it. So that's pretty useful. As I mentioned before, I think they have more conversational fine-tuned data. That is incredibly useful, and I think that the formatting of their responses is better. They do have the tasks feature. I don't think it's really very popular. You can use it with O3 and O4 Mini only, to where you can essentially do stuff on a schedule, but I personally don't think that's very useful. So if we go back to Gemini, there's quite a few things that it has that the other models, that ChatGPT does not have. So here's its video generation, which is not completely unique. It's a little bit more embedded in here versus Sora, but at least you can do it within here, and it did a pretty good job, I think, of generating this video. One of the most useful things to use Gemini for, at least for me, is there's a variety of stuff where it can actually interact with YouTube videos. It can watch the YouTube videos. It can tell you a lot of what's going on, because they own YouTube. That's an incredibly valuable asset. In fact, I think that if you take a big step back and look at like the overall AI landscape, the fact that Google owns YouTube is potentially its biggest advantage, and might be the reason why it wins a variety of different races, because there's a good reason to believe that these other companies are using YouTube to train their models, and Google's just biding its time, and eventually they're going to be able to gobble all them up, because they use their YouTube to train their models, even their non-video models. But anyway, so I'll give you an example. There's this microplastics video, and I didn't have time to watch it. It was like 15 minutes, but I want to be healthy, and so I'm thinking about, okay, how can I consume less microplastics? This is so cool. Like it has even jump links directly to those parts if I want more details, but it summarizes it so much quicker. This made it a lot easier, and I was able to consume this in just a couple minutes. Another thing I use this for is generating chapters and descriptions of those chapters after I upload my YouTube videos. So you can see here on this ChatGPT versus Perplexity, it generated these chapters. I don't have to go in and generate them one at a time. That's really useful and a big time saver. I think it puts additional content for me to put into the description for SEO purposes. And again, let's not forget that its ability not just to search YouTube, but the internet as a whole is far superior on Gemini versus ChatGPT. Also, I think that the massive context window that you get with this model, the 2.5 Pro and the Flash, I believe currently it is 1 million tokens, and soon it should be 2 million tokens, is a pretty big advantage. You can put in a ton of content in here and have it analyze that content. I don't see that coming to play that often and there is reason to suspect that just having a bigger context window isn't necessarily always good, because it can kind of lose track. Even though they do have tests for that, I don't really trust it that well to always get that consistently. You know, it really makes more sense to try to give it less information, even if it can take that information in. But you know, if you've got a giant PDF and you want to try to find something a little bit more directly, I think Gemini is going to be pretty good at that. ChatGPT is good at that if it's within its context window. The mobile usage, the mobile app usage experience, and I have an Android, is very similar for both of these. I assume that that's also very similar on the iPhone, so there's not a big difference there. Okay, let's find a few more examples of actual usage so that we can compare the two. So I have adjustable weights, and I wanted to analyze the different combinations of possible weights, and I told it to put it in reverse order repeatedly from highest to lowest. And it's, even though I did say highest to lowest further up in this conversation, but for some reason it's interpreting it wrong, but overall it did give the correct answers. ChatGPT, I felt like gave a little bit easier to consume answers, and it understood more of what I'm trying to do right from the beginning. I did use O4 Mini High, so this is one of the examples where I thought the thinking models were both useful. Very similar responses, although I would give ChatGPT a slight advantage in this scenario. Personally, I don't see using either one of these for coding, because I think you can use these best models within Cursor or Windsurf or VS Code, Klein, or whatever. So there's really not, it's much better to have it integrated in there versus to use the code directly in here to kind of copy and paste and to give it all it's just a lot more work without it. So I don't think that's a great use case. So if you wanted to summarize articles, this is actually pretty useful. Here is the ChatGPT response. I had to copy and paste the article. It was a BBC News article about India and Pakistan. And I like the ChatGPT response slightly better, but Gemini is not as bad either. It does have some additional links in here and has more information, but I actually want less. So overall, I'd give a slight edge to ChatGPT here. If it was able to actually, neither one of these were able to actually access the URL. I tried doing it directly from the URL in both scenarios. We go up to the top. Neither one of them could, but some websites, they are actually able to crawl, in which case I would trust Google more with that situation. So another use case is content generation, creative writing, and in this case I'm going to use GPT 4.5 versus Gemini 2.5 Pro. So this one, it looks like it just finished. Gemini was quite a bit faster, and I'll leave you to read these, but I'm going to pause and read them myself and see if there's a real big difference. And here's the GPT 4.5 one. You know, English really isn't my strong suit, so I think they both did an okay job. If you really want to tell the difference, I think overall it's not really huge in my opinion, but I'm not the best person to judge that. So let's circle back around and check up on the deep research at Gemini, and at a minimum it did pull things correctly. So that's good, because again in the other one it pulled really old models when I did this, and it didn't really do a good job of answering the question. This did a better job of pulling correct data. I'm not sure the answer was really very useful. This is very, very long. It does have this quick export to docs thing that is pretty useful, so that you can go in here and edit this. It's just more consumable and usable and shareable in docs, so the integration into Google Docs is pretty useful in my opinion. So cut a garbage in, garbage out, so I don't really trust its ability to search ChatGPT. And so I'd say this gets an advantage, even though I don't think this is incredibly useful, just because this report is just so long. And this ChatGPT did the same thing. In fact, I think this report might actually be longer, and this is just walls of text, and it's like, bro, like, who has time? Give me a summary. Even the executive summary is just like grinding, and maybe I've just got too much shit to do, or I'm too lazy. So all the other features are pretty much on par with each other, except for one thing. I think Gemini overall is faster, especially if you need the thinking models. I don't know if there's a way to turn off the thinking. Personally, I would prefer to just use, if I don't want the thinking, or if I want something really fast, I'll just use the 2.5 Flash. They said everyday help, but now that I have this flashes very fast, even though this is a thinking model. But if you really need like a super fast answer and you don't need any thinking, GPT-4o might actually be faster in those scenarios. It's kind of like depends on the situation, because I would trust GPT-4o for some things more than 2.0 Flash. I don't think that was a very good model, or is a very good model. So let's recap sort of the overall pros and cons. ChatGPT has the code interpreter, which is really useful, the memory, which I really like, its ability to generate images like YouTube thumbnails is superior. It has tasks. I don't really care about that too much. And its formatting of its responses are much better. With the Google Gemini, I think you get a better deal for your money. There's additional features beyond the app itself that kind of span into more broadly usable productivity tools. I think its ability to process YouTube videos is incredibly useful and a big time saver, and by itself is worth it. But overall, its ability to search and process up-to-date information is superior. And no matter how much ChatGPT tries to improve its ability to do search, I don't really trust it. I don't trust it to do deep research either. You get a bigger context window with Gemini, but I don't think that's a really big additional advantage. So I actually currently plan on paying for both. It's kind of annoying that there's not like this one is always better than this one. There are scenarios where I like ChatGPT a lot more, especially with the image generation and the memory. I think that those two things are the two main things that I want it for. But then Gemini, when I want up-to-date information, and YouTube, there's no way ChatGPT can compete on that. So what do you think? Is there something in here that I'm missing? Is there something that you think that is really good about ChatGPT or Gemini? Which one do you prefer? Let me know what you think. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.